Fresh out of nursing school, I got my first real job in a fairly large hospital in a department that I honestly never thought I would ever work in. It was a 6-bed cardiac ICU with rooms that overlooked the city capitol building. It was a very nice unit, and I started out working 12-hour night shifts. The hospital I worked at had 4 other ICUs that were always full, so my unit always ended up being code bed, meaning if someone was arrested or went downhill fast somewhere around the hospital, they came to us. I had been working there for a year, and I was no stranger to death. Each patient of mine who had died on my shift was usually already on their way out. Their families were by their side. The DNR order was signed. The funeral home was already picked out. It was rarely ever a surprise. In fact, the only time I was ever needed to do CPR on my shift, it was not even in my department. So I went on a nice, long 2-week vacation, got engaged, and had a beautiful tan. On my first night back, I received a report from the day charge nurse. She said she was off for a few days and suggested to remind the next day charge nurse that the priest was coming in the morning to bless room 4. I thought she was kidding at first, but she was serious. Apparently, while I was on vacation, every patient who was admitted to that room had died. But this came as no shock to me. People died often in our department, and it being a very religious institution, having a chaplain for almost every department, I just shook it off. Then she said that room 4 was empty and that it would serve as code bed for the night. Around 2 a.m., I got a call saying that they have someone to fill our open bed. The ICU downstairs was now going to be code bed, so we were getting your run-of-the-mill chest pain, take a look in the morning kind of patient. Nothing to get excited about. We get the patient admitted and all settled in room 4. He was a gentleman about 50 or so years old, very pleasant. His wife was with him, and she looked dead on her feet. I got her some warm blankets and took her to our waiting room that had cots so she could get some rest. Around 3:30, I was watching monitors and the cameras in each room. All the patients were fast asleep. The cameras all cycled through about 3 seconds each on one small TV we had on the desk. Room 1 was fine. Room 2 was fine. Room 3 was fine. Room 4, there was someone in there. It cycled too quickly for me to get a good look, and the doors to the unit were locked. Maybe the other nurse let his wife back in. I walked down the hall and glanced inside. There was nobody. I shrugged it off. It was late. I was tired. I was probably just seeing things. I went back to the desk and continued watching the screen. Room 1, room 2, room 3, room 4. I was not imagining anything. There was someone in room 4. The person was standing in the corner by the window, their figure completely draped in shadow. I could not move my body. It cycled through again. This time it was closer to the patient's bed, by maybe 2 or 3 feet. The hair stood straight up on my neck. The next time it cycled through, it was even closer. It stood in the light coming from the hallway, but despite the light, it was still shrouded in darkness. It cycled through again, and it was right next to the bed. My heart started pounding, and I could barely squeak to the nurse on the other end of the desk. As soon as my words formed, and I was able to make some kind of noise to get her attention, the alarm on the monitor went off, signaling that the patient had cardiac arrested. The overhead system came on. cart is needed in CCU Room 4. People poured into the department. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, respiratory therapists. They all rushed into the room, but I couldn't move. It cycled through the rooms again. Room 4 came up, and this time the lights were on, and there were 10 to 15 people surrounding the bed, doing CPR and slamming meds into his IV. Someone went to get his wife from the waiting room, but there it was, in the opposite corner again, a dark figure watching this scene play out, just standing there. The man died of a heart attack. Room 4 was blessed that morning, right on schedule, and I put in my 2 weeks' notice. It was near the end of high school, 2006-ish, fall in northern Wisconsin. Perfect, stomping around town weather. One Friday after school, I was over at my on-off high school boyfriend Jay's house, playing video games, or whatever. Around 7 p.m., we typically would meet up with our whole crew at a local restaurant, but we still had several hours to kill. We were getting bored, missed those days, and it was so lovely out, so Jay suggested we go walk the train tracks on the west side of town. The town has been built up so much since then, but at the time, there was only a Fleet Farm and a small burger joint near the tracks, and that was about it. Miles of woods on either side surrounded the tracks. As it was perfect weather, and that doesn't last long in Wisconsin, I agreed, and we jumped in his car and drove across town. We parked his little car to the side of the burger joint. At this point, it's late afternoon, about dusk, sun about to set. We hop out of the car, walk about a block where the train tracks cross the street, hook a right down the tracks through the woods. That area didn't get as many trains going through as a different set of tracks in town, and there was also plenty of space to the left and right of the tracks, into the woods if a train did approach. It seemed safe. You could see maybe a mile in each direction if a train was coming, and to either side, just tall pines. We're walking down, balancing on the tracks, talking shit, jumping over stuff, whatever, for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Up ahead of us, we could see a few boxcars off to the side of the tracks. This feels creepy, but it was normal. As we approached them, we could see there were 2 boxcars attached to each other, maybe another 10 to 20 feet, and then a single boxcar behind them. I got the heebie-jeebies as we approached the boxcars, but they were both shut. So as we peeked around on them, climbed up, etc., they were less menacing. Cool. We keep walking. Sun is now down, and it's twilight. Quiet. We are both looking down as we walk past the boxcars, balancing and such. We get past them, maybe another length of a boxcar, when I just have the sense to look up. That's when I see it. I stopped short. I swear the hair on my arms stood up, and suddenly I felt like a prey animal that had been spotted. Jay, what's that up there? There's someone on the tracks? He stopped and looked up. What looked like maybe half a mile to a mile down the tracks, standing directly in the middle of them, was the shape of a person, or what I thought was. But for how far away it is, the figure was unnaturally tall, standing stiff and still, arms at sides, with what looked like the shape of a bowler hat or something. I can still picture it. Now, Jay doesn't fuck around with ghost stories and alien tales. He's a non-believer, but he saw it too. We need to go, he said. He grabbed my hand and spinned me back to the direction we came from. We were walking very briskly, but if you have ever been on train tracks, you know it's all small rocks and pebbles, so it's a little rough. About a minute passed. My heart was pounding, and I looked back over my shoulder. This person, who was originally about a mile away, was so much closer. It's like he suddenly jumped half the distance between where he originally was to where we were. But still, the same sickeningly tall, featureless shadow with a hat, standing still, arms to sides, stood in the middle of the tracks. "Jay!" I actually screamed, making him whip his head around. I've never seen this guy scared. He grabbed my hand tighter and broke off into a sprint. Jay is about 6, and I'm 5'4", so his stride is a bit longer than mine. A couple years prior, I recovered from a fractured knee and femur, and it's common knowledge I cannot run. If you've ever seen the cartoons with someone running, and the other person is kind of flapping behind the runner, held by the hand, that's what I felt like. He took off. My legs moved, but my toes barely skimmed the tracks. We ran past the boxcars off to the side, and as we're about to get past the two that are hooked together, I stole one more frantic look over my shoulder. There he was, one boxcar away. Same weird proportions, like a dark, opaque shadow. I swear my eyes bugged out of my head, and my body and adrenaline said GTFO. I forced my legs down and pushed my own damn self into a run. We plowed forward, no more glances back, hooked back into the street, and frantically fumbled our way back into his car, slamming and locking the doors behind us. I remember both of us sitting there, panting, staring forward for a good minute or two, until snapping back to it with a WTF. The sun went down, and nothing could be seen toward the tracks. We went to our hangout with the crew at 7, chomping at the bit to tell everyone what happened. No one believed us or cared, really. I told my dad later on, and he says so many people died building that railroad, it was probably a ghost. Thanks, Dad. Fast forward to maybe 2011-ish. I'm in college. Jay and I break up and don't keep in touch. I get a text from him, out of the blue, a link to that Slender Man game. I remember sitting in my dorm with a chill as I watched the preview and felt sick to my stomach. How he only moves toward you when you aren't looking and is frozen staring at you when you look back. Ugh. I read the Wikipedia page and creepypasta and all that shit. I know all of that stuff is made up, but the similarity to what we experienced freaks me out. Present day. I looked up the chunk of railroad where it went down in my hometown on Google Maps. It's much more developed with shopping and housing around, but there is still a little stretch surrounded by trees, which is the one we walked down. I'm going back for Thanksgiving and was thinking about taking a jaunt to the tracks. But reading all these spooky stories made me change my mind. Just in case it is some entity, I don't want to take it back with me.